Dr. Amy Shah, what's going on?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
So fun.
So glad to have you. You've been doing the rounds, huh? This morning you were over at the Broken Brain show and then the Model Health show.
All your buddies.
All my
Everybody
buddies.
everybody lives in the same little neighborhood. It's amazing.
It is cool. It feels kind of like, yeah, it's like this, it's a new mediascape, and you've got like your shows.
But all of you guys, especially you have huge audiences, huge shows. You're talking about a little bit different stuff. There's so much good information that you guys spread out in the world. It's important.
That's what we're trying to do. And we all have like our different like lenses,
Yeah.
right?
Totally different lenses. Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. We were connected via Sean. Shout out to Sean Stevenson at the Model
Yeah.
Health Show, who just said really incredible things about you.
Thank you.
And so yeah, I'm excited to do a deep dive.
Yeah, let's do it.
Before we got rolling, you were talking a little bit about circadian biology and how that's something that you've become passionate about.
Yeah. Very, because we don't hear about this. We don't talk about it. We talk about eating healthy all the time. We talk about, exercise all the time. But I didn't know that you are literally a different person in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, because 80% of our genes are turning on and off depending on the time of day that you're in. It's just mind blowing that we don't have technology or policies around improving our circadian rhythms and syncing it up. So, we're eating at crazy times of the night. We're staying up at crazy times. We're getting blue light at all kinds of times. I really do think that not just cleaning up our own personal routines, which we can do, and that's what I talk about in my book, but also having, some policies, technology, education around how other people can improve their energy and long-term health, brain health, long-term metabolic health by just changing how we look at light and dark.
That's so interesting. I want to get into the specifics of how we can, better suit our routines to what we know about circadian biology. But how did you become interested in this topic?
I had my own burnout journey,
Hmm.
and I don't think that anyone, any one of us at this point especially, can say that there isn't a time in your life where you just felt completely burned out. It's more than just fatigue. Like, you feel fatigue, but you also feel almost like disconnected. And you feel the exhaustion is more than a good night's sleep, away. It is something that's persistent and it changes your mood and it may spring up as anxiety and GI symptoms. And so I was in this place, and I did nutrition as undergrad.
Hmm.
I was a physician, double board certified, and I kept thinking to myself, like, something's off. I don't feel right. This is not just being tired. This is like there's something. So instead of diagnosing myself, I asked some of my colleagues, maybe you can run some tests. I said, do me a favor, run some tests. I'm just not sure what's going on. And I felt so stupid because everything came out quote unquote normal. I was
Hmm.
like, they were like, oh, you're just getting older. You have kids, that da da da. But I knew there was more than that. I knew there's got to be some other tools that people could give besides that. And I thought maybe it was my diet. I had a hunch that it was a little bit about my stress levels because I was chronically stressed. But honestly, in our culture, we wear burnout and fatigue like a badge of honor. That I thought I was doing all the right stuff because I was burned out.
Hmm.
And so when I started looking into it, circadian rhythms, gut health, hormone health, this all kept coming up in my research. So when you look at, you know, what can you do to improve your energy? And I think I hear people talking about eating healthy, but I didn't realize that that gut bacteria is actually always talking to your immune system and always talking to your hormones and always talking to your brain. And so what we eat can actually fight burnout or fight fatigue. And I think people don't make that connection. And then I realized that when we are eating is also making a big difference in our bodies. So when I started to get into intermittent fasting, I started to think, okay, but I get this whole intermittent fasting thing, but when are you really supposed to eat and not eat? Because nobody tells you that. You're just supposed to fast for, say, 16 hours. What I learned is that Nobel Prize in Medicine went to the researchers behind how circadian rhythms influence our biology.
Mm.
And what we should actually be doing is fasting when our bodies need to rest, meaning our gut bacteria, our every cell in our body, and we should be eating and working and, seeing light during other hours. And it's not just in our brain, it's not about sleep, it's about metabolism, it's about longevity, it's about feeling good, performing well. So I was like, this is a no brainer. I mean, I don't understand why I never knew about this. So I really just very simple steps started cleaning up my routine, my nighttime routine, and my daytime morning routine. And I started to see a big difference in my energy. I mean, we can all anecdotally say when you spend more time in nature, you just feel better, but I had no idea what the gravity of the change would be. So I started to clean up my morning routine, my nighttime routine, and then I started to do this kind of circadian style intermittent fasting. And that's how I really started to build my plan because once I found stuff that was starting to work for me, I started to try it on other people. And then that's why I wrote the book because I thought these are really easy things that all of us could be doing every single day. And you can, there's no reason you can't fast more. You can add in longer fast, but really doing a simple overnight fast is a great starting point for most people who are feeling tired or burned out.
And most people already do that anyway, right?
Yeah.
While they're sleeping.
Exactly. So you're really adding the crazy thing is, Max, that people eat 16 hours a day. If you look at the data, we're eating 15 and a half, 16 hours a day because of this food addiction that we have, the broken metabolism, these companies that hijack our brains. We're craving, we're eating. So we're literally only taking a break for 8 hours. So even if we increase that break to 13, 14, 15 hours, we're doing a big service to our bodies. And so this is something that should be a part of our normal culture. It's not deprivation, it's not a fad, it's not, a trigger for, other like eating issues. Of course, because we live in diet culture, if there is someone who's dealing with eating disorders, I do have to say any of these things can be a trigger. So please don't try anything if you feel triggered by something like even an overnight fast. You have to heal yourself first before you kind of go into that. But other than that, I think every single other person can do an easy overnight fast for, you know, 12 hours sounds like nothing, but it's a big change from the 16 hours that you're eating on a daily basis. So little things like that. Like I realized, wow, I thought I have to eat every 2 hours to keep my metabolism going. And I would eat all the way till the time I went to bed and then roll out of bed and start eating because I thought I have to get it going. But I realized that that was the wrong opposite of what you should be doing.
Has that been has that concept been conclusively put to bed at this point that you don't need to eat every 2-3 hours to?
It's still something that trainers tell their I see people all the time getting that advice from
Hmm.
trainers because in our world, we are always talking about grow and, more muscle and more growth. So if you're trying to get more muscle or get fatter, then yeah, you should be spiking your insulin every 2 hours, right? So you could become a bodybuilder and not eat any bad foods and maybe grow the muscle selectively, but you're also growing fat cells, right? So for the common person who is just working out and working with a trainer, the eating 2 hours every 2 hours advice is horrible advice, especially when they are already metabolically challenged in other ways. So,
That's super interesting. Have you? I'm assuming you've been to Vegas at some point in your
yeah,
life. It's amazing when you walk through the catacombs sometimes of those resorts, in the mall areas. You have no concept of time,
yeah,
like in those environments, right? They purposely do that.
yeah,
They purposely do that so that you feel the same degree of energy, whether it's
yes,
noon or 4 in the morning.
yeah,
And I feel like that's a good metaphor for how our brains must feel and our bodies
yeah,
must feel. The organs of metabolism must feel today. In this kind of food environment where and this light environment where we're just not receiving cues properly in accordance with ancestral biology.
Yeah, it's like being hungover. I mean, you know that feeling. Have you ever been hungover? You know that feeling of a few
Are
times in
you
your life?
asking me? Many,
Yeah.
many times.
So that feeling of you feel exhausted, but it's more than exhaustion. It's like this brain fog and it's this moodiness and it's these like there's all this other stuff going on besides just feeling tired. That's how our bodies feel all the time. We're jet lagged and we're feeling exhausted because the crazy thing is, at night, our body is even more sensitive to light and food because they're trying to figure out like, okay, should I stay up? Is there an emergency? Is he running away from some danger? Because it has to stay hyper vigilant if that's the case. And when we're blasting ourselves with blue light and eating and doing all kinds of things, the body's registering that, okay, we need to stay up because there's something bad. Repair and renewal is paused, and we do not turn on those genes because we're thinking that the body needs to stay awake because we need to run away. There's some kind of emergency situation. So we're really shortchanging our repair and renewal processes when we're doing all of this. And I always say, like, if there's smart entrepreneurs, these tech people, can't we figure out ways to actually change technology? Like in the last 10 years, that's when we've all been doing all these bad things. I hope that in the next 10 years, we can figure out ways to decrease the amount of blue light we get at night and maybe increase the amount of natural light we get during the day so that we can actually take control of our bodies and get more energy and like not shortchange ourselves and accelerate disease, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have like the night shift settings on our phones, right?
Yeah.
Which people have told me that that's actually not that effective, although it feels effective because the
Yeah.
minute you take it off night mode,
Yes. It feels like, oh my God,
you're
it's so
like,
bright.
whoa.
Yeah.
So I use that, but so I feel like that's like sort of a halfway measure. I wish my TV would do that as well. I don't know why big TV manufacturers haven't
They
figured
should
out.
do that. And
Yeah.
then the other thing is ambient light in the room. So I didn't know that, having ambient light in the room is really a metabolism killer. So they had in the weight loss studies, they've very well established that people that sleep with ambient light have more trouble losing weight when
Hmm.
they do diet studies than people who sleep in a dark blackout room. For me, it's like that's the easiest measure. I mean, that's free for most people. You could wear or very inexpensive. You could wear a face mask or eye mask. These are things, I mean, we're trying all these diet pills and all these shortcuts. Like, why not do things that are actually 100% effective in helping you lose weight or help your metabolism?
I agree. Guys, if you need a good eye mask, we make them. Shameless plug for Genius Life merch. You can go
Oh,
to
yeah.
thegeniuslife.com. We have an eye mask. No, but so I want to ask you a question because this came up. My assistant Sydney asked me this recently about blackout curtains. So I love blackout curtains, but when you wake up, the thing that I don't like about blackout curtains is that it keeps the room pitch black in
Yeah.
the morning,
Yeah.
and I would much rather wake up with the sun,
Yeah.
so that you get that light in the morning as you're supposed to, as our our
Yeah.
ancestors arose with the rising of the sun, right? So are blackout curtains, would you recommend them, or do you think that there's like a better way to do this? Maybe,
I
I don't
think
know.
I think if we could think of a technology, I mean, we have so many cool people listening to this. If there should be curtains that just automatically sense light and open, right?
I agree with that.
That would be so amazing.
That would be amazing.
So what I do is I wear an eye mask, but the basic deal is that once you decide your nightly routine and you decide on the hours that you want to sleep, try not to have that blaring alarm waking you up. I mean, I know it's so hard for most people to do, but I think if you start at least a few nights a week, if you're able to sleep in a dark room and then wake up naturally and then immediately or shortly thereafter go get some sunlight, you're in good shape. So, what I do on most mornings as a part of this whole journey that I was on, I wake up in the morning and I literally go brush my teeth. I do kind of a little bit of a, wash up, change into my workout clothes, and then I step outside. and I get the direct sunlight. So the sunlight you get through a window is 5 times less,
Mm.
than what you would get in natural, even on a cloudy day. So you really do want that direct light. So we're talking about 10,000 lux even on a cloudy day and 100,000 lux on a sunny day, whereas a light gives you 1 to 2,000 lux. So turning on your lights in your room feels like, oh, I'm waking up, but it's really that natural light that you need exposed. It could be a minute. You just go outside. For me, oftentimes when I'm in a rush, I'm literally outside for a minute. I get my sunlight, I do a little self reflection, and then I'm off. And so, ideally on days I'm off, I do a workout outdoors. I mean, that's the best, right? You feel like $1,000,000 after that and then break my fast. But then a lot of times, and that's what I did during the pandemic. But then now that gyms are open, some outdoor spaces are open, then doing a fasted workout and then breaking your fast is something that I think has really been transformative in my energy levels.
Okay, so let's talk about fasting.
Yeah.
So you advocate for people starting with at least a 12-hour
Hmm.
fasting window and, compressing their feeding window. For most people, it's about 16 hours, which is insane.
Yeah.
And you're saying just make it 12 hours.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of orient your day then around that?
So 2 to 3 hours before bed, stop eating. That's kind of the big hard stop. You don't have to do it every day. I usually on the weekends spend time with friends or family, and you're eating late into the night, and that's okay. You don't have to make this an all or nothing thing because there's something to be said about social connections, as we know
Of
this
course.
year. But on weekdays, I really make a very, very um, boundary driven effort to end my meals 2 to 3 hours before bed. And then, so this is good for shift workers. 'Cause some people ask me, well, I don't get home till, midnight, whatever bedtime is for you, if you can work backwards. Ideally, that would be sometime after sundown.
Mm.
If you really want to go ancestral and biologically absolutely correct, you probably want to do it sometime after sundown and then fast overnight. And in the morning, if you can do a fasted workout in nature, that would be ideal because then you're getting that blast of sunlight into your retina, which goes to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which fine tunes all the cells in your body to say, like, okay, it's morning time, time to do metabolism, time to do thinking, complex tasks. When we're not getting that, we're always feeling kind of like down. Like that's why you need your coffee and your energy drinks because we're completely off.
Mm.
So then you do the fasted workout. One of the big advantages of a fasted workout is you can deplete your glucose. So most people in America are completely dependent on simple sugars as their fuel, right? And even if you're not, but you still have a good amount of simple sugars like stored in your liver. So, say you ate a pasta dinner, you're going to be burning that pasta all night long. And even in the morning, probably halfway through your workout, you're still burning that pasta, right? But if you have a pretty low processed sugar, processed carbohydrate diet, and you sleep overnight and you're doing a fast 2 to 3 hours before bed, you're going to deplete a lot of that blood glucose. And then your body's going to dip into the liver stores. And once you kind of dip into your liver stores and you go for a workout, then your body's going to have to start to look for alternative sources of fuel. And that back and forth switch between using sugar for fuel and using fat for fuel is the magic of intermittent fasting. So, Dr. Matson in the New England Journal of Medicine study that came out in 2019 basically said it's not just about caloric restriction, because we know caloric restriction can be good for people, longevity, metabolism, but this is more than that. There is things that are happening, and when the metabolic switch happens, that's when BDNF goes up. That's when you see all these anti-inflammatory benefits. You see all these downstream effects similar to exercise. Like, exercise is not about just, the muscle. That's the benefit. There's all these global benefits, and that happens when you metabolically switch. So, the concept that I take is we don't know, we can't tell when you metabolically switch because you're doing it so rapidly back and forth. So, one of the things I actually ask people to do is if you are comfortable with doing an overnight fast, then stretch it a little bit by doing a workout, which rapidly uses up the stored glucose, and then you're going to dip into that metabolic switch zone, which is the magic. And then you break your fast and you go on with your day.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about any potential downsides of fasting?
Mhm.
Because I've talked quite a bit about fasting as of late on the podcast, and I really value the time and vigor that you've put into your research.
Yeah.
Um, and we haven't really talked about any potential downsides in the past, but you also being a woman, I
Yeah.
think, can bring a new voice to this.
Yeah.
Um, are there any, considerations that women need to have? Because I mean, I'm sure that you know this, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts as to why this is. But most of the research on fasting in humans, the clinical research, is done in men, right, or
Yes.
postmenopausal women.
Yes.
So for premenopausal women that are listening, like, what are there any potential downsides to
Yeah.
this?
There's lots. Okay. But Max, I want people to think of it like they think of exercise. There are risks to exercise, right? You don't want to be running a, ultra marathon. Not everybody can do that. And so, same thing with fasting. Not everybody wants or can do a 3-day water fast or a 5-day, water fast. So, that being said, you would never, ever tell a woman you shouldn't exercise because oh yeah, there's this extreme form that could actually turn off fertility. That's exactly like intermittent fasting. Like
Mm,
you're actually confusing people and shortchanging people, those experts who say, oh, women should not fast, because that to people is now confusing. Now they're like, oh, wait, I should go back to 16 hours a day eating because that was like better for me. But that's the disordered eating, right?
mm,
And so the consideration that I tell people, women of childbearing age, is that you are wired differently than men. And this is a fact. We are reproductive creatures. And what our body does to protect reproduction um, is to shut off the ovulatory cycle when it senses a lot of stress. And that can be from mental stress, that can be from famine. You don't want to give birth during a famine or a time of major stress. So, female athletes know this way too well. They train really hard. And if they don't have a good amount of rest in between or recovery, they will lose their period. And fertility, people who are trying to get pregnant will deal with this all the time because mental stress can also stop those ovulatory cycles. And that's what happens with fasting. If you tell your brain that you're in a famine, it will turn that off.
mm.
And there's one study that people quote. It is a 6 mouse study, so very tiny study, where they had mice fasting, female mice fasting every other day for 12 weeks. And they found that there was an effect on the ovaries and reproduction. But remember, mice are so different than humans. Their metabolism is 6 times our metabolism. So for them, fasting for 24 hours every other day, that's like us fasting for 6 days.
Wow.
So this is not the same. You can't equate it. Yeah, if I fasted for 6 days in a row and did that for months on end, I will definitely do a number on my hormones and many other things. So that's, I think, the real big take home message is you can fast. Just take it easy. Do not go deep and aggressive when you first start, because some people can, and many women will text me, message me and say, I do great. I do the same thing as my boyfriend or husband and they're doing great, but not everyone. And many women will notice that when they try to even do a 16-hour fast every single day off the bat, they're going to get hormonal effects. And I definitely felt that way. I saw somebody talking about fasting and the research. I was like, I'm all in. Like, I'm going to get an A+. So I started doing it every single day. And literally by day 3, I felt fatigued. I felt like my sleep was disturbed. I felt like my cravings were on fire. And what luckily I pulled back because I knew that something wasn't right. But some people keep going with it and they really damage their metabolism and their hormones in the long term.
Hmm. So interesting. I really love that you brought sort of, you brought exercise into the equation, which is another form of hormesis, right?
Yeah.
Hormesis, which is, of course, beneficial stress. And
Yes.
it's up to each person, men and women, right, to figure out where that line is for them, right?
Yeah.
Where a stressor becomes too much stress. You know, you got to walk that tightrope and discover for yourself, at what point, like where that stress is actually causing you to adapt in a beneficial way. And also, where it becomes counterproductive, where it becomes too stressful.
Well, that's exactly how exercise works, right? When I was really burned out, I was skimping on my sleep and I had a lot of emotional stress and like stress at work. And I would try to do these hard workouts early in the morning. And I was really shortchanging my results. I was like, I don't know, I feel like I'm getting like less in shape.
Mm,
And it was because I had so much baseline stress and I was just adding fuel to the fire. And so I talk about that in the book. Really, if you are in place of burnout and major stress, that's not the time to be doing aggressive workouts, whatever aggressive means for you. That's the time to pull back, maybe do some more nature based walks or yoga, and then get yourself in a better place, which shouldn't take too long. And then add those back in. So, the same thing, hormetic stressors are supposed to be good for you, but only if they're intermittent and they can't be constant and they can't have the volume turned on max because you can't add on other hormetic stressors then.
yeah. I mean, fasting, exercise,
Yeah.
sauna, cold water
Yeah,
immersion.
exactly.
Um, sun exposure is
Yeah.
good for us in part because it's a sort of form of hormetic stress. And then you throw coffee into the mix, right? And then you throw psychological
Yeah,
stress, you
stress.
throw panic porn on the media,
Yeah,
you throw just
exactly.
all
I
the
love that panic porn.
yeah,
Haven't heard that.
concept. I mean, it's so true. But you throw
Yeah.
that all into the soup and suddenly you've got hello, burnout, and you're wondering why.
100%. That's basically what happens, and we don't ever talk about it, like, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing all of those things at once. Get control over your baseline stress, and then start adding in hormetic stressors, selectively." And I think in the biohacking world, we kind of a lot of people try to do a million things at once, and I think we talked about it offline, but, taking antioxidants, it actually is bad for you because it's really there's a very fine balance that our body needs with um, antioxidants in our body, and adding more is just throwing that off. So, just using these tools and understanding that they're really great all on their own, but maybe not in combination, and maybe you don't need to try everything that's available to you, and being a little more selective. So, what I do is I try to stay in the crossroads of scientific evidence, ancient practices and nutritional therapies so that it doesn't mean that I'm always bound by the literature, but at least it's science informed. And so we're trying things that are, you know, things that we know will help us. Um, but maybe there's not a huge randomized controlled trial about it, but we are informed about how it works. Instead of doing the million things that we could be doing, me and you are both in the wellness space. We could literally be doing 100 things a day, and some of us are. And I just feel like the more I know, the more I realize that you have to be selective with what you decide to do with your time and energy.
Couldn't agree more. What about fasting and thyroid function? Does fasting
Mhm.
suppress the thyroid?
So, same thing as exercise, right? Yes, it can if you do it in extreme amounts. But no, it won't if you are doing a simple overnight fast.
Hmm.
And of course, people with really labile thyroid, people with really labile insulin and glucose levels, they definitely have to work with someone because you don't want to be throwing all these hormetic stressors, even if it's a short one, without someone kind of monitoring your levels. But it's something that's very, very doable with any kind of hormonal issue. As long as that baseline hormone issue is fixed or you're getting treated for it, so that you're not throwing in a hormonal stressor, which is a hormetic stressor, not throwing that into the mix when you're still dealing with another one.
Yeah. So you mentioned people with that are prone to maybe disordered eating should definitely check with their healthcare provider, but also people that have, you know, like type 2 diabetes, things
Yeah.
like that.
If you're on exogenous insulin or, because this could really throw off your blood sugar levels and bring them down, which is a good thing for most people. But if you're trying to figure out how much insulin you should be taking, This is something you need to work with a practitioner, someone who's pregnant, breastfeeding. A lot of women contact me because they're like, "Oh, I'm pregnant, 20 weeks. What should—" And I'm like, this is not the time to experiment with a fast because maybe you'll get it right, maybe you won't get it right, but you don't want to be playing around during this time. Go ahead and eat the way you normally do. And then when you are ready, then that's a time of self experimentation. You and I both just talked about it. Like everybody has different thresholds for what stress is for them. So you might be able to run a marathon, but I won't, or I'll need 2 years of training to get there. So that's not the time to experiment. And same with children. Those are the kind of the groups that shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. So when do you have your first meal in the day typically?
Okay, so I'm a breakfast fan. So unlike most intermittent fasters, I eat breakfast. This is delayed. And the reason why is that there's a big breakfast study that really clearly showed that the earlier your meals in the day, the better metabolic control you have. It makes sense, right? You when you eat meals earlier in the day, you have better metabolic control. So the way I do it is that I start earlier in the evening. If I want to push my fast a little bit, I start a little bit earlier. I'll start at 6 or 7 instead of 8. And then I'll push it to the next day. And so I'm having my breakfast around 10 or 10:30. And so it's still a breakfast. It's just later. And
Yeah.
some days I'll push the envelope. If I feel good, keep going. But I don't believe that you should be having your biggest meal at the end of the day. That's a cultural thing that we've built that's actually not beneficial for our bodies. If you infuse glucose into your bloodstream, and there's very good studies that show you will be able to control your blood glucose levels until about 8 o'clock.
Hmm.
And then the same amount of glucose infusion causes blood sugar spikes all throughout the evening. And so, what you're doing is, if you're having a huge load of food late at night, you're basically setting yourself up for metabolic disease.
Wow. That's shocking.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
that's crazy. And if you were going to eat a late night meal, would you say that it's then, or have a late night
Yeah.
snack? Would
Yeah.
you say that then the best foods to reach for are ones that are lower in?
Yes, glycemic index. Yeah.
Hmm.
You really want to reach for the nuts, or, there's something that is not going to give you that insulin dysregulation because you're just better able to handle it during the day.
I know a lot of people like some almond butter before
Yeah.
bed or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's actually when I train people to fast, often because we're so used to eating all the time, it's really hard to get to bed if you haven't had something in your stomach. So one of the tricks I tell is like if you can have a little bit of fat, even just 40 calories, that might hold you over for the night and it'll keep you in that metabolically fasting zone. I'm not talking about like thousands of calories of fat. I'm just saying a little touch of almond butter or coconut butter.
Hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
And so you're like a 10 a.m., 10:30
Mhm.
breakfast eater. What are you eating? What's that first meal consist
Okay.
of for you?
So
I'm getting
usually,
granular here. I
yeah,
hope
I
you don't
like
mind. I want to
it.
know. I
I
want to know
like
everything
it.
about your routine.
Yeah. So in the morning, I'm usually post workout at that point. And I love my chai. And I talk about, I had no idea when I was growing up, but there's a lot of medicinal compounds that happen in Ayurveda that we have now found in all this literature to be the most anti-inflammatory foods on the planet. And so things like ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, are really amazing. I mean, they could be billion-dollar drugs. So I have a chai with those spices every day. And then I usually have something with fiber and protein because I'm having it post workout. So I time my protein to be right after the workout because that's when you can use it most efficiently. You can build lean muscle. And so I have it usually either it's a smoothie because I'm on the run, or so I say there's four S's: a smoothie, a scramble, a salad, or a soup are the four options that I usually reach for that have high fiber and that can have protein sources, right?
The four S's. Wait, say those again. The four
Uh,
S's of how to break your fast.
soup, scramble, smoothie, or salad.
I love those.
Yeah, like all fours, like you can choose that as ways to break your fast at any time of day. And don't be shy about having a non-breakfast food for breakfast. I think that was something that I had to like break this mental barrier. Like I can't be eating a salad or like I can't be having a soup at 10:30 in the morning, but it's really fine. You will survive.
You know what I broke my fast with today?
What did you figure?
A ribeye.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What time was that? What
Because
time?
one day we're going to be dead, right?
Yeah.
So you got to enjoy life, I
I
think.
love it.
And I had
Just
it.
don't start it with a cupcake. That's all I ask because what ends up happening a lot when I was in training, I fasted by mistake a lot, in my medical training. And then I would come home and I'd be so hungry. And while I was trying to make the food that I was supposed to eat, I would be snacking on chips and I would have cookies and I would have all this sweet, fun foods because you're so starving. And by the time the real meal would arrive, I would already have eaten like 1,000 calories of very unhealthy stuff. And that's how a lot of people, when they accidentally fast, they'll eat a whole pizza, at the end of it. And so you can't out fast, just like you can't outrun your bad diet.
Yeah.
So people will say like, oh, I've been fasting, but I don't feel very good. Because what are you eating when you break your fast? Are you having, you know, 10 Twinkies to break your fast? And that's why you feel awful. You can't you can't just use that as your sole treatment. And some people have a couple of doctors actually said to me, this whole fasting thing doesn't work because there's a trial that just came out in JAMA and they took obese people and they asked them to fast but not change their diet. And they saw that they were able to out eat their intermittent fasting. So the intermittent fasting intervention helped them, but not significantly different than the traditional eating pattern. But as you know, with obesity and with how foods have hijacked our minds, you can literally eat mm, 4,000 calories, even if you had a truncated amount of time,
Hmm.
pretty easily in our culture, right? So you have to take that into account that these are obese. Like we know that there's lots of disordered eating, but definitely in certain populations. And if you take those populations and you say, well, sorry, you can't eat all day, but you can only eat for, 8 hours, they can easily eat all of that bad stuff in those 8 hours. So I do say that you can't just use it as your sole um, technique, but if you stick to the 4 S's, you're eating a clean diet, you are working on your baseline stress, that hormetic stressor can do wonders for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've done some Instagram posts where I show people the calorie density of modern, whether it's ultra processed convenience foods or fast food, but you can easily get 2,000 calories in like a small, like a burger and fries,
Yeah.
that you eat and you're still hungry,
And
you know?
and I used to when I used to come home from a long day of work and I would snack in my kitchen, I started realizing how much food I was consuming because it seemed so easy to eat chips and salsa or hummus and guac and whatever. And even these seemingly kind of healthy foods like, oh, guacamole is healthy, but you're eating it with chips. And I was literally consuming my whole dinner's worth of calories in my snack that I was using as my pre-dinner snack. So that's the problem with like our society. We need to reprogram our brains because we're literally hijacked by all of these pathways, the dopamine and the serotonin and the GABA, all these brain pathways that food is supposed to trigger. We're programmed, but these are volume levels on max when we're supposed to see them naturally at very low levels in nature.
And that's why diets fail all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
people are trying to moderate their consumption of these foods, which there's just no way that you're going to be able to do that for the long term.
Absolutely. And that's why you have to change the quality of your diet. It's not necessarily that a calorie, of course, a calorie does equal a calorie when you measure it in the lab. But in our bodies, certain calories, certain foods trigger these pathways, these addiction pathways, these neurotransmitter pathways that now we're even finding in the gut. So even when your gut bacteria recognizes it in your colon, they are triggering pathways
Hmm.
because there's serotonin made in our gut. There's all kinds of signals that we're sending to our brain. So we have to realize that some foods will falsely trigger these pathways that make us feel good, make us feel addicted, and we have to change the quality and our dependence on these foods to be able to get away from that.
Couldn't agree more. The fewer the ingredients, the better.
Yeah. And it's hard because, broccoli just isn't made to taste as intensely flavorful as a burger or as a, shake from Shake Shack or whatever. But it's because you're supposed to get these signals in you're supposed to feel full after you eat a plate of broccoli. You're not going to feel full when you eat a plate of Doritos.
Yeah, they're minimally satiating.
Yeah.
I used to go through bags of Doritos.
Yeah,
Um,
I did too, because back in the day when I was growing up, it was like this very, very like special food. My parents would only buy it like if people were coming over, and so I would like park myself right next to the bowl, big bowl, and it was just my favorite food. I haven't had it in years,
were
but
you raised with a because you said that you were born in India. Were you
yeah.
raised with like a traditional Indian diet, or what was that like?
Yeah, when I was in India, it was super traditional. I mean, this is like I took they start school really early, like at age 2. I took this like horse buggy carriage to school, and there was this community that all the kids would play together, and it was very traditional. The foods were very traditional and really natural. Lots of outdoor play, lots of community, lots of walking. And then when my parents moved here, of course, you're assimilating. They both worked insane hours. And my grandmother, who are sorry, which was like is so embarrassing to me, would like drop me off at the bus stop or whatever. And then everything changed, right? Our diet changed, the lifestyle changed, the amount of community changed. And it was about a few years after that my dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes,
Mm.
something that runs rampant in our family history, but it happened to him in his 30s. I mean, I was like 5 years old. And so looking back at it, I'm like, "Oh, it all makes sense," right? Because he came here, he wasn't moving, he was working a desk job at insane hours. He was going to business school, in off hours. We would eat Pizza Hut and Taco Bell because we wanted to feel like, American. And then it wasn't until I went into college and started to learn nutrition that I was like, "Oh, I get it now. I get why everybody is getting so sick, because we totally changed the way we ate." And so I came back to it and I was like, wow, there's an anti-inflammatory index in the literature that has been validated with over 1,000 studies that ranks foods the most anti-inflammatory. And the top foods are tea, fiber, phytochemicals, um, and then the spices,
Hmm.
turmeric, ginger, garlic, pepper. So if you think about it, these traditional diets, they had all the things that they needed to have all around the world, Mediterranean, Asia. But now we basically lost almost all aspects of that anti-inflammatory index.
It's insane. And you probably at the time also traded really healthful traditional fats that your
Yeah.
ancestors used for generations, like ghee,
Ghee. Yeah,
right? For
exactly.
corn
Processed,
oil,
yeah,
you know?
100% like canola, and it's such a sad, state because now if you look at modern Indian food, it is full of trans fats and poor seed oils and hyper refined flours and sugar because, just as we've evolved our food supply, they have too. And the tastes have changed because now there's Coke and Pepsi and there's Doritos there too. So now people want more flavorful foods, just like us. If I go back and I have my coffee order from even 10 years ago, it's like I can't even have it. It's so sweet and but at that time I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it was too sweet at all, because we're so used to that.
These coffee drinks, some of them hundreds of calories.
Hundreds of My son is 13 and he's just getting to the age where he's like asking for soda or fruit drinks. And I have showed him the amount of sugar that's in one, even like healthy, real cane sugar, 36 grams, in one serving, or 40 grams. I'm like, you could eat an entire brownie or more for that 40 grams. And so he's like, oh yeah, I'd rather eat a brownie then, like,
Yeah.
uh,
At least a brownie has like some degree of like a satiety inducing effect,
yeah,
whereas like these drinks, like they just don't.
they don't even feel like you're eating a dessert. You just feel like, oh, this is just normal. And so teaching them really young about the things that we never learned about is super important to me to say, hey guys, I literally tell them, I'm like, your brain has been hijacked by these companies and you have to unlearn that. You have to remember that in nature, you're supposed to detect sweet and, salty and savory, but the signals have been turned out so high that now you have to turn it down again, and you gotta remember that there's no way you're going to like real food if you are chronically eating this hyper processed food.
Yeah, I made a post recently on social media talking about how a good parent tries to dissuade. That's it. It was a very uncontroversial statement. And it sounds ridiculous that I'm even bringing it up. But like, I was like, a good parent should dissuade their children from eating this ultra processed junk. I'm not saying like restrict them,
Yeah.
because that's what my mom did for me.
Yeah.
My mom was like, my mom clearly delineated for me in my little brain at the time what was going to be beneficial for my body and what I should like not eat as much of. Like, Max, don't eat don't eat the entire box of Pop Tarts because I
Yeah.
know, because that's something that I probably would have done if left to my own devices. Don't
Yeah.
eat the entire box of, Entenmann's donuts and
Yeah.
cookies and whatever.
How is
But
that controversial?
because I got some pushback from it saying that like you shouldn't ever try to dissuade your kids, don't ever do that. Just like, lead by example, but don't teach them that. You're creating eating disorders basically in doing that. They're, kids who are brought up in homes where they're dissuaded from eating junk food. And of course, like nobody shared any like research to back up their claims,
Yeah. No,
but
I mean, there's definite anecdotal, I know somebody when I was growing up, her family was super healthy, never had any snacks, so she would always be rummaging in our pantry when she was come over. I mean, obviously that goes without saying, like if you never let them have a birthday cake or, never let them have popcorn at the movie theater, they're probably going to feel deprived,
yeah,
right? But
100%.
that doesn't mean that you let them run rampant with
Right.
processed foods.
I ate all those freaking things.
Yeah.
I ate it all. I ate Pop-Tarts, I ate the
Yeah.
junk food, I went
Yeah.
through bags of Doritos, and we had them in my house. But my mom also tried to she taught me like
Yeah.
a good, empathetic, rational
Yeah.
human being would do, you know?
That's exactly what I was saying about the soda thing. I think what I said to him, I was like, wouldn't you rather have a dessert later, like a dark chocolate, or than spend your sugar on something like that doesn't even give you any satisfaction? And he was like, yeah, actually, I'd rather have, if you're going to let me have a dessert later, I'd rather have that. So just teaching them these kind of things doesn't mean that you're stopping them. It's not like I ripped it out of his mouth, while he was drinking it or something like that. But it's important to educate them because we weren't educated, and look, we had to figure it out ourselves. Either most of us were in a very dark place and had to figure it out. So I was a freaking nutrition major, but I remember going to those conferences and they were all sponsored. I don't know if it's still the same because this is 20 years ago, but they were all sponsored by cereal companies
Hmm.
and Kraft and which are arguably the people that run the show for nutrition education
Oh, yeah.
and policy. So
They used to fund, I don't know if they still do, but they, companies like that used to fund the dietetics
yeah,
associations.
and it's great. I mean, it's just like medicine, right? We so much of funding comes from pharma. But the problem is there's no such thing as a free lunch. So what they taught us, and when I first got into the Harvard hospitals for my training, there was a big pushback against pharma offering free lunches. And what they said is there's no such thing as a free lunch. When you get free stuff from people, and we get free stuff all the time from people, you are mentally indebted to that to maybe speak on that or thank them in some way. And so the pharma industry was really started, they said, well, hey, these are trainees. These are new doctors. They are just coming out. And if you are infusing your thoughts and your items and your free lunches, then they're going to maybe make decisions that are influenced by that. And I thought that was such a great move. By that particular hospital because pharma runs so much of the show in medicine and they still do. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing because we need them to fund trials and we need them to think of innovations for people who are like going through cancer or whatever. But there's also something to be said about having ideas that are not influenced by big companies and forming your own opinions on things.
Couldn't agree more. I have a rule that I'll only promote something that I personally will use.
Yeah.
But I think there's this big ethical gray area where a doctor, is like literally getting free lunches from these companies and then making prescriptions to pay. They're being influenced at the point of prescription,
Yeah.
and that's, I think, unfair.
It's very scary how it's, luckily, and I can attest to most of my doctor friends and colleagues, it's not as common as you think. I think we've done a really good job of regulating. So all these people are like, oh, all doctors are paid by pharma. I'm like, I've been paying $0 by pharma
Right.
throughout my entire career. And I can say that safely about mostly everyone I know. There are certain sects of doctors, like in the pain industry, for
Mm,
example, that do get pharma because that's big business for them,
wow.
pain medications. But for a vast majority of people, you're really just going on your own judgment. And so, yeah, there's people who have bad judgment, but that's not because they've been paid by pharma.
Right.
They just have their views.
Isn't there a website where you can go and you can punch in like any doctor's name and find
Yeah.
see the gifts
Yeah.
that they've been given?
Yeah. And doctors have to disclose if I ever give a talk, I must disclose all of my relationships with pharma. And I think that's such a great thing to do because if you're giving a talk on any particular topic, say it's about brain health
Yeah.
or gut health, you should know if that speaker is being paid by a certain company or is a sponsor for something.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously people know when I'm reading an ad, right,
Yeah,
for my
yeah.
podcast. So people know on my podcast what is an ad and what's not. And then I also on my website, in the About Me page, I think at the bottom, it probably needs updating, but I go to great strides to to keep my audience informed about like who's paying me. Not that, and it never informs my opinion or my advice or
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah,
that.
same.
But you're right. It's totally, I think it's totally important, just for the sake of transparency
I
to let
took
the
it
audience know.
I took it to the other extreme. So when I first started on Instagram a few years ago and I got my first like really cool thing that I love and I use, I couldn't even talk about it authentically. Like I felt like I could, I had to say so many times, "Hey, I got this for free." Like this is so because almost went to the other extreme where I actually used that product, but I didn't feel comfortable even talking about it because now I felt like I was the sponsor or something.
Yeah.
So I had to relearn like, okay, well, maybe the best strategy for me is just like what you said, things that I actually use. Um, Authentically or would use are the only things that come into my radar. And I have to feel really authentic and use it for a while before I can talk about it because then because I really had a hard time with that because, how are you supposed to, I didn't want to sell it. And then I wanted to be really clear that I got it for free. And then it ended up being like a negative thing, like
Mm.
it almost made it sound like I didn't really like it, but I just want to tell you guys about it. And it was really tough. So, really being careful for me, it's very, very important because um, of the message that I'm trying to spread is that most of what we can do is in our own hands. And we don't want to be using these hacks and tricks and tools and foods and things as a shortcut because maybe it's nice to have, but it shouldn't be your method to madness, how you get healthy.
The method, yeah. And it's also, there are so many, the vast majority of people. I mean, there's just so much, there's low hanging fruit, for people that are not being uh, paid attention to and not being catered to. And
Yeah, in my book, I honestly do you ever read bad reviews of your book?
yeah, I
So,
shouldn't, but I do. Yeah,
yeah,
of
I do.
course.
I shouldn't either, but I did in the first 2 weeks, and
But
some of
there aren't many.
Yeah, oh yeah. So some of my bad reviews were, well, there's no secret in here. There's no, there's no magic. There's nothing that I couldn't have, researched on my own, or nothing mind blowing, because they're so used to these packaged books with like
Yeah.
a solution that is, counterintuitive or brand new, like buy it on my website, that it's hard for people to think that they actually can do these things for free, and there's all this research backing it. But I guarantee that person is not doing any of those things, because they're like, oh yeah, I know about sleep, or I know about circadian rhythms, but tell me something, that I can buy, or that I life shattering.
Yeah, because people want the shortcut.
Yeah.
It's like that meme on social media. There's like two. It looks like lemonade stands, like two
Yeah.
booths, and
Yeah.
on one there's a banner that says, it's like the easy way out, take the pill or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
then on the other one, it's like actually
Lifestyle.
change your diet and
Right.
lifestyle. And the line is down the block for the one
Yeah.
where it's for the pill.
Yeah. If you sold a pill tomorrow that was like the Genius Life pill, you could be a billionaire. You could
Yeah.
still do it now, but
I'm
by
not
the
I'm
way,
not I'm not ju-
opposed to it.
I'm not judging though, because I would take the pill. Like
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
could take a pill like that
yeah.
would give me, for example, like, do you know Aaron Alexander of the Align podcast? He's been on my show a few times.
No, well,
He's
okay.
this massive Adonis of a guy. If I
Okay.
could take a pill that would give me his body, I would take that pill. I would
Yeah,
take that pill.
and you can't blame people for wanting to find a magic solution that doesn't yet exist. Like, I get it. There's this mystique of, there must be there must be something out there that we don't know, that's, under a rock somewhere in some other part of the world. And the problem is that there's a lot of people preying on that. So there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of podcasts and people who are saying like, "Oh, drink this thing and you will have vitality of life." This whole crazy celery juice thing was something that I thought was so interesting, because it's not that it's bad for you, but these magical properties that come out of celery juice, like it was just billed as this fountain of, I don't know what, but it was great marketing, and it just did really well and took off
I
because,
mean, as a medical doctor, you see something like that, are you just like rolling your eyes?
yeah. I mean, of course, I want people to drink vegetable juice. Like, I would tell you in a heartbeat, if somebody's like, I want to drink celery juice, I'm like, go for it. I love that. But don't pretend that it can solve all your, problems in your life and cure all your ills by drinking this one drink a day. It just caught on because it was easy. It was something that you could, um, do and think in your mind, that it had all these magical properties, and which, placebo effect, we know is 30% could get some improvement. But other than that, there's really no benefit to it besides that. But that's what people want, right?
See, here's what I think about that whole thing.
Okay.
If you are the kind of person that is following somebody for nutrition advice that claims to get their nutritional insight from a ghost, which is what the medical medium does.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
he's
Oh,
a
is that why it's
medium.
called medium? Okay,
Yeah,
got
so
it.
he
Okay.
claims to get his health insight from a spirit, right? So if you're the kind of person who sees that and is like, "Oh, that's the kind of person who I can use, in my
Yeah.
life," you're obviously a highly suggestible person, right? So already
Yeah.
it's filtering for people who are highly, highly suggestible,
Yeah.
right? And these are the kinds of people who can be hypnotized, who can be like,
Yeah.
it's like that kind of personality metric. And then he tells you that if you drink this juice every single day, which we already know the placebo just in general, like in the general population, is so powerful, then to me, it's like, yeah, these people are going to they're going to think that they're seeing incredible health gains
Benefits.
happening. But it's like, it's a very suggestible population, who've already consented to getting their health information from somebody who follows a ghost.
Uh, that's,
So
that's hilarious. I did not know that. But then there are some things I will tell you over the last few years that the placebo effect is actually beneficial. I mean, it is beneficial in many cases, but for example, like manifestation, okay? Mindset work, okay? In my mind, I know that mindset work is really important and you need to bring your stress levels down, but people are talking about crazy things that happen when you can manifest your dreams or whatever. And I knew that not to be true, but I felt like if I subscribed to that, that at least I would get that 30% placebo effect benefit. And that's 30% mindset benefit is amazing, right?
mhm.
So I think that there's something to be said about like spending some time doing, we know the beneficial effects of doing gratitude and self-assessment and meditation and mindfulness. But then, even taking it to the next level, maybe doing some manifestation or maybe some visualization. Athletes do visualization all the time. High performers do visualization all the time. So I felt in that case, well, I don't know if it's going to bring me like, all the things, all the success that people get from it, but I'm willing to get 30% even if it's not working. So that's how I felt about the celery juice thing. I felt like, you know what? If you want to do celery juice and you think it's great for you, great, but don't, it's like there's no science that says that. That's great if you believe in it. It's like believing in, whatever belief system you have. Like good for you, but there's really no science backing behind that.
You heard it here first, folks. I'm glad that we had to take it to a medical doctor to finally debunk. But this has been so fun. I'm so glad to have had you on. This was an
Yeah.
amazing chat. I feel like we could keep talking.
I
Like I'm just
know,
loving
I
this.
know.
What I know you've got a flight to catch
Yeah.
at some
I want
point.
to hear one thing though. You were talking about how you deal with haters online. I'm so curious because I'm really gun shy because I'm new to social media. I'm a doctor. I'm a woman. I'm a mom. Like I have all these like hats that I wear that make me a little gun shy from saying anything that would upset too many people because I know I could say something to you offline, but I do get frazzled by these people who are really out there to frazzle,
Yeah.
to tickle your, to really make you upset.
Yeah.
But how do you handle that? Because you put out controversial stuff all the time, or at least it seems like it.
All the time. And I got thrown shade today, actually, by some guy, also a medical doctor, actually,
Mhm.
who said
Oh, they're
something
the
like on this person's page. Literally, this happened today. I'll try to recount so somebody tagged me. Somebody posted a meme that they had created about all the diet books. My book wasn't in there, but it was like all these books that, look a little ridiculous all in one
yeah
group. It's like everything has keto in the title,
yeah
everything, and and he was kind of like shitting on all those books and saying like, is it any wonder why so many people are confused? And then somebody who I guess follows both of us said, between you and Max Lugavere, who I don't even know why he thought of me because my book wasn't
even
in
in
there, and
there
it's not
yeah
even marketed as a keto book or anything
yeah
like
yeah
that. Said, I don't know who to believe. Like, you were Max Lugavere. And this doctor commented saying, he said something like Max is a low carb shill or something like that. And I was like, I'm not a low carb
are you
shill.
getting paid by the low carb
Yeah. Mafia,
yeah
the low carb
exactly
mafia. Um, yeah, I'm not at all. But like I see something like that, and it doesn't actually affect me because I think that these, I just think that they're probably just a-holes.
yeah
Like they're probably super insecure. I'm not going to make any judgments about this person's life, but probably unhappy in their own
right
life. Maybe again, not sure if this applies to him, but there's a lot of mental illness, I think, in a lot of the trolls, especially the trolls that I get,
yeah
who tend to be these like just like over the top vegan like
evangelists
evangelists. Yeah, not
I
that I have anything against people who are on plant-based
yeah
diets,
yeah
but people who discover me from like the explore page will come over, and
yeah
they tend to be 9 times out of 10
yeah
vegan evangelists,
yeah
and they say the worst. But it doesn't bother me at all because I'm like, this person's either mentally ill or this person has a really sad life.
yeah That's
Um,
a good way to think about it is like really reframing it. And also, I think the way I think about it, and I think I can say this about you, if you come from a good place, a place of helping, a place of, you don't have anything to disclose about, your affiliations or why
and I do
you're,
when I do.
yeah. And
Yeah.
like, so if you are coming from a place of helping and authenticity, then you don't have to worry about what other people think. Cause you could be the best, ripest peach on the planet, and there's going to be someone who doesn't like peaches, right? So,
Yeah, there are people out there that don't like Disneyland.
yeah, there's
So
people who don't like Mother Teresa. There's people who think that all these people that we think are just everybody would love them, Oprah, whatever it is.
yeah,
Anytime I say anything about Oprah, people are like, "Oh, she's this and she's that." And I always grew up thinking she was like the person that, everybody loved. So there's no one person like that. So I do have to always remind myself on social media that when you're putting yourself out there, there's going to be people who don't agree with you, but that if you're coming from a place of helping and authenticity, that it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also when people do, like, I also make the distinction between haters and trolls and people who are actually like
Yeah.
constructively
Yeah.
criticizing my work. And it's not often that that they'll bring something to my attention that, you know, maybe I made an error or something like that, but it has happened.
Yeah.
and
Same.
and somebody has brought that up and I've changed my
Yeah.
thing, you know, or I've taken something down or
Yeah.
whatever, you know.
I put up a quote one time and I didn't realize like the person who said it because I couldn't recognize the name, but this was really early on. But I realized, oh, okay, that makes sense. I need to do more research on the things, even these little things that you don't even notice, like, oh, there's these nuances. Um, not to the point where we should be policing everything we write, because I do think there's something to be said about I think people like it when you kind of speak um, authentically about things that are a little bit controversial. Obviously, that's a thing that people like to see, as long as you're not doing it, to upset too many people.
Well, but I think that if something is controversial, you should talk about it.
Yeah,
You know, I think that, like, you know, I tweeted this the other day, and this is again, I don't want people to think that I have this vendetta against
yeah,
plant-based diets, but there's a lot of like fear mongering that goes on social media, right? Whether it's like fear mongering against sugar or carbs
yeah,
or, you know, quote unquote chemicals or whatever. And usually when you do that, there's always somebody that comes out of the woodwork to defend, you know,
yeah,
sugar or whatever. But for some reason, like fear mongering meat and animal products gets a hall pass. And to
yeah.
me, they're among the worst fear mongers.
Well, this is what I think about
And it just bothers me.
animal products, and I'll be honest. I think that in the future, we may be able to parse out which animal products are safe and healthy. But I think that if you look at the research that's been done, and the problem is we can't parse it out, right? Diet studies, nutrition studies are so difficult that saying that eating grass-fed healthy meat may be healthy for you is a plausible thing, but that's not something that has necessarily been proven. But we can definitely say that processed or overly processed dairy and meat is bad for you. So I think you could say that, but to say that my problem is I love plant-based eating. I am all about predominantly plant-based eating, but I don't subscribe to being um in that camp of attacking anybody. Like, as a doctor, I'm agnostic. If you come to me and you're a carnivore, I'm good. I have to treat you and I want to treat you. If you're a vegan, great. I want to treat you. If you're whatever, keto, whatever it is, you don't have to attack every single person for their belief systems. And that's why I don't like pick a camp to be in, because if you pick your keto camp, you have to fight against vegans. And if you pick your vegan camp, you got to fight against. And I don't really think that very, it's not something that makes for good TV or a good podcast or a good conversation, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really bring anyone value when you're at the end of the show, both people are like angry and still going to go back to doing what they do anyway. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think people should be able to decide how they want to eat. Like
Yeah.
if you want to eat plant-based,
Yeah.
by all means do it, you know, but your decisions I think should be influenced not by fear, but
Yeah.
by
And you shouldn't worry that if you're saying that plant-based is good, that if you wear like leather tennis shoes that some people are going to call, it's going to be this big controversy. Like, I always felt like, if you're doing your best and you're eating a lot of plants, that should be good enough. We have like enough stress in our lives that we don't need to be like policing everybody's, what they're wearing or what they're doing or how they're eating, or
yeah,
you know what I mean? If you want to have sugar today and somebody sees you you shouldn't be attacked for that.
100%. I just want people to be healthier. That's
Yeah,
it. Be the best versions of themselves that they can be.
100%.
Today and for the long haul. Um, Dr. Shaw, this was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
So your book is out now.
Yes.
What's it called?
It's called I'm So Effing Tired.
I'm so effing
Are you
tired.
so effing? Everyone is effing tired after this year. No, or
Everybody.
even before this year.
Yeah,
And
it's
we
true.
need solutions and we need a toolkit. And there's no celery juice type drink that's going to be introduced in there.
There's no easy fix, but there
Yeah.
are fixes that are sustainable
And that are easy.
that are easy. Yeah, yeah. It's just not like a magic pill,
Yeah.
you know. But But yeah, definitely go and check out Amy's book. Obviously, she's a wealth of information and so compassionate and passionate about what she's doing. Are you on, where can people find you on social media?
Okay, so on Instagram, I'm at FastingMD. On Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, I'm at Amy Shah MD. And then the book is at imsoeffingtired.com. And my personal website is amymdwellness.com.
Love that. And where are you
Yeah.
based?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Damn nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, the last question that gets asked to everybody on the show, Dr. Shah, what does it mean to you to live a genius life?
Wow, that's a great question. Living a genius life means making decisions, putting up boundaries, and living your best life based on those decisions and boundaries.
I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, succinct. This was awesome. Thanks for being here again. And look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much.
To all you guys out there in podcast land, thank you for your time and attention. Share this episode of the show. Highlight your favorite quote from Dr. Shah or I. Tag us both. I'm sure she'll reshare it. I'll definitely reshare it if I see it. Text me to let me know what you thought about this episode of the show. 310-299-9401 is my number. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.